Good morning, everybody. Looks like we are having a hard time after all these late evening parties yesterday. So Thursday is probably not ideal, especially in the morning, but never mind, we're going to go into it. Hello, everybody. Hope you enjoy this one. My name is Jürgen Haas. I'm from Lake Drops. We are based in Germany and have some presence in Switzerland and Spain as well. But we are a pretty small team of 4 people, and we are focusing on back-end development, cooperating with other agencies, helping them out if we can deliver something that they need. I'm also in the Drupal community since 2007. That was back when 4.6 was a thing, pretty different to what we have today. And I'm a co-maintainer of the Gin admin theme as of yesterday, plus a privacy track lead for the Drupal CMS that we all call Starshot these days. So what are we here for today? Well, I want to tell you how it happened that ECA became a thing. Pretty brief, short thing. Why I strongly believe that ECA is something for every Drupal site. And I want to demonstrate that on some simple use cases, but then followed by 2 use cases that are from client projects that do really complex stuff, but components of those may give you an idea on how you could do similar things on your Drupal sites and projects. And there should be some time for a summary, of course, and Q&A after that. So let's introduce ECA. From the project page, you can read there, it's a no-code solution. It's a processor, kind of a black box, which responds to events that are dispatched in Drupal anyways. And it can then execute conditional actions that you can define in any sequence, in any complexity, in loops, and so on and so forth. And the name ECA hopefully is quite obvious. It comes from events, conditions, and actions, because those are the only 3 building blocks that you need to build automation. We started development of ECA back in July 2021 as part of a Drupal 7 migration to Drupal 10. And the client had extensive use of rules, but rules wasn't quite landing and is still in the air, I believe, in the modern Drupal world. So we decided it's time to propose a new approach, which is made for that object-oriented modern new world in kind of symphony. And we proposed that to our client and asked them to develop that as an open source project right from day one. That's a little tip. When you ask the client to do that before you develop something for them, they are much more inclined to say yes. And so they did as well. The only condition from their side was you have to stay in budget and you have to deliver what we need. And everything else didn't matter to them. The beauty was the benefit of open source showed up only 3 months afterwards, because there was a second company called Open Campus. They have a Drupal distribution for universities. They had exactly the same requirement. They had a budget. They hired a developer, MXH, Max Hauptmann, also from Germany. I didn't know him before, but he joined the team and we shared the effort and joined forces. That was just fantastic, showing how open source can benefit everybody, even those who pay for it. Version 1 came out a year afterwards, and we are now 3 years later on version 2. That came out earlier this year together with Drupal 11. Only a few words on that slide, and they are really important to me. We have designed a product which comes with a really solid architecture. And part of that, why I'm saying this, is there is only one dependency. ECA only requires Drupal core. And I can tell you that both bodies are pretty complex, and it's a task to keep them working together. There are so many changes. Although, 10.3, 10.4, and now 11x, 11.1 eventually, there are changes behind the scenes that you always have to keep up with, We have lots of tests, so we find out very early if something changed. We get notified, we can fix that. But I don't want to think about a situation where we would be dependent upon 10 other modules as well, because they are doing their thing and so on. It gets out of control. We don't want to get into that. And as you know, I want to maintain ECA for a very long time. I pledged for that. It's on video, so I can't hide that. So I want to have a job that is achievable, right? Now, ECA as a package comes with the processor, that's the core part, and with 17 sub-modules that all relate to some areas of Drupal core, like render or queue, views, endpoints, content, config, cache, access control, and so on and so forth. Just turn on those that you need and leave the others disabled. There are 2 extra sub-modules that come with the package, one of which is the UI. You can turn off the UI of ECA whenever you like, very much like with views and the fields UI. This is kind of protecting the installation if you don't want your customers or the users to actually make any changes. There is a developer sub-module as well, which comes with code generators if you want to extend ECA and build your own plugins for events, conditions, actions. That one helps you to get the boilerplate out, and then you only have to focus on your functionality. What I like a lot, there is quite a nice ecosystem already with more than 40 modules integrating themselves with ECA. I believe there are even more because I can't watch all of them. So I have no idea, but what I do know, I counted them and they are part of the documentation. There are, as of summer this year, more than 650 plugins that are all available in the UI for you to utilize in your models. And the nice thing is, if a new one comes up, you don't have to do anything. Just enable another module that comes with a plugin, and the plugin is available for you for utilization. No compilation, no preparation, config, or anything. Now, why is ECA for every Drupal site? I hear people a lot, they get excited when they hear about the possibilities of ECA. And sometimes months later, project managers or developers are approaching me saying, oh, Guy, I just wish I had a project where I could give it a try. And I say, you do. It's all of your Drupal sites. Just install it, make it available, and I promise the day when you need it will come sooner than you may think. And why is that? I want to show you a few examples, just 4 of them, that in our experience are day-to-day tasks where it was extremely helpful to have it at hand and it became our friend right away. This one is about, we as an agency in general, we track all errors that are in the Drupal log and we track them to fix them. Now we need to be notified about them, and this is what that one does. So every time ECA is listening to the log system of Drupal, if there is an error, critical, or don't know what the other one is, it knows it needs to notify us and create an alert. That happens with an HTTP request. We have Alerta that collects all the alerts and we're going to deal with them. Some of the errors are not for us because sometimes we integrate backend systems where another DevOps team is responsible. Now in the past we forwarded the alerts to them, but guess what? We fix the errors because we care, but not all of the DevOps do. So some of the errors popped up multiple times every day, and that became just annoying. So we built that one and said, look, there is a list in the set list of special cases. There we can identify the type of the error, go through a loop on the top right, find a different channel if that error applies to a different team, and then just submit the alert to the right channel that the right people get it right away, and we don't get annoyed any longer with all those that don't belong to us. Another one is, we have a client that runs a portal, and that portal creates email notifications to their users. And they came up with the idea, look, those who never signed up, well, they are registered users, but they probably haven't signed in at least once. And they want to have the email content being different for those who haven't, just to give them a reminder there is some value if you sign in. This model just finds out, has the recipient of that notification been signed in at least once, if not, altered the content of the email message. My favorite scenario is the authentication flow. By default in Drupal, you get redirected to the profile page after login. That's pretty annoying because who wants to get there? Nobody, right? Therefore, we by default want to redirect them, that's the one on the bottom, to a destination which is by default a dashboard, which is for most users, except for internal stuff like admin, manager, editor, or help desk. If the user that just logged in has at least one of those roles, we change the destination and redirect them to the content overview page. That one does the same thing, but a little bit more complex. So let me zoom in so that you can see a bit more. There we go. So it's the same thing. When the user logs in, there is a first condition. I fell into that trap myself until somebody on Slack asked that question. Then I realized, oh, we have that problem as well. Password reset link is treated like a login. Now, if you define a redirect after login, you ruin the flow for the password reset, and you can't recover from that. So if you do something like that, the first condition you have to apply is identify if it's a password reset attempt, just do nothing, skip the model, right? Otherwise, if the user is a content editor, redirect them to the content overview. If it's an admin, redirect them to the admin overview. And if it's neither a content editor nor an admin, then redirect them to the user profile. So that's step one that's happening here. Let's zoom out, and then we zoom in over here, because there is more that's happening. After login, and also after user update, we find out whether that user belongs to a certain domain from their email address in their profile. If they belong to our internal domain from the website, we assign them a special role and provide them with a message. If they don't belong to that domain or just removed that domain from their email and changed it, then we also remove that role from them and send them another message on screen. And last but not least, there is a third part down here. If a new user registers on the site, we take a view, which is the third one on the top, load all admin users. So that's just a view that returns a list of all the user accounts that have an admin role. And then we loop through that list, and each of them gets an email notification. It's pretty simple, but it's useful if an admin knows, oh, there is a new user, let's have a look what we need to do with them, if anything. So that's about the simple use cases, and there are dozens of them, I promise you, and it's extremely helpful to have it at hand when you need it. Our first use case I want to show you, and I show you only some models and explain what they do, which is just because it's a SAP front end, and you can imagine that's pretty confidential data that we have to deal with there, so I can't show you the inside and how it's happening, but the second use case is showing Drupal stuff as well. But this one is so complex that I wanted to show or share that with you because it gives you some really great ideas on what can be done and how easily you can achieve that. The first one is about deleting revisions. There is a permission in Drupal core that allows a user to delete all revisions. In our case, for the customer, we have to make sure that only the latest one can be deleted. So we are checking first, does the user have, well, first of all, we say deleting permission is forbidden. Then we check, does the user have permission to delete revisions at all? If so, we're gonna load the latest revision of that entity, and then we verify if that is the latest one, and only then do we set the access control to allow. Pretty simple, powerful, doesn't need an extra module, just does it out of the box. This one is a custom event on the top, form field validation error. This is like the components in the old rules days. You can build a subset of a rule, in our case, a ECA model, and you can call that from anywhere else in your ECA models everywhere. So we have lots of models that validate forms. If any of those finds an error in the form, it calls that one, and this one handles if and how the error message should be displayed to the user. They do have some exceptions where some validation errors may be skipped by certain roles. That's all what that is about. And last but not least, we also have error handling there, a bit different from the general approach I showed before. This one is creating a GitLab issue right away. There is GitLab integration in ECA as well. So every time there is an error in Drupal, we get a GitLab issue, and our engineering team can get a list what they need to do, except for 2 errors over here. The link checker module is creating some not very helpful error messages. We're going to skip them. And there is in views a load entity failed error that is irrelevant, so we skip that one as well. Now this one is a beauty, I think. This is about they need exports from the data. And we are dealing with millions of nodes and revisions and stuff like that. And exporting data is a complex thing over there. And it's not only about a single export they need. What they need is sets of exports. Like there are 3, 5, 7, or 9 views that need to be exported at once and combined into a zip archive because they have a workflow which loads that zip and does something with those 9 files that are contained in there. Now, in Drupal 7, that was developed in a custom module, and you didn't want to read that code. When we migrated that over, it took us a week to understand what was going on. Looking at that one, it's very easy to understand what's going on. It is. Yeah, it looks complex, I agree, but let's look into it. There is a request, a route that asks for a specific export, and then there are going down, there are lots of them, and each of them, first of all, knows, is that a simple export that can be done within seconds? Then we execute that straight away, pack it in a zip, and provide the download to the user right at the screen. But there are some of them, they run for hours, so we can't have the user to wait for that. Those we are putting on a queue, provide a message to the user and say, look, we're going to notify you when it's done. And then the queue manager is eventually working on those exports, creating the zip file and sending a link to that zip in an email to the user who requested the export. And then after that, it's just calling view after view after view. And at the end, there is then an action which creates a list of all the files that have been created, sets the file name of the zip, and then merges the files into the zip and sends the email. That's all. Now, the nice thing is, and that was my worry, and that really turned true, there are changes to that. You know, there is a manager coming up, look, for that set number 3, we need an additional export. We need an entirely new set, or remove one that's already there, and etc., etc. Editing that one is just easy, and you can then provide it to the manager and ask them for approval, because they can read that and they understand and they can tell you what. Don't show them PHP code. They just send you away. That one is only partly shown. This is form validation, and we, for example, validate things like, is the title starting with the characters TA? And if so, certain rules apply. If not, then other rules apply. So really, really difficult. All of that has been in PHP before as well. Migrating that over, it was a hell of a job, but it all helped us to make ECA a thing. Going to the next one, this is about generating entity labels. There is a module which is called auto label or something like that. We don't need that, and it wouldn't even do part of what we need over here. Like, let's use one example on the top right. There is a node type which is called group account. And if that's been edited, then there are certain rules on how to build the title, really, from content from other fields of that node. But that's not all. That's the easy part. In this case, there is a documentation node associated with that group account, and we have to make sure that that one gets the same title as the account. But then you can see we only update the label on the very right if it differs from the one before, which is when we update the node, the title probably doesn't change. So why should we update the documentation side? That would just be useless MySQL usage and slow things down. We don't want to do that. We can also ensure unique values on a regular text field. Like if somebody creates a new node with a text field where they have to put in an ID, if they click save, this one, and it's only 4 steps, verifies that this value is unique. How is it doing that? It's trying to load another node with the same value in that field. If that succeeds, then it's a duplicate and the form is invalid. That's all it does. Pretty simple, but powerful. Status indicator. It's like an HTML div that they want to have on top of the screen, indicating that, for example, a node is blocked or a node has a special status that forbids certain activity. And here we do the same thing. If it's an account, we load that account node, verify the status, and if it's either 1 or 2, we produce a message that's been rendered on top of the screen. So we have access to the render array as well and can add or remove or change things in there. If it's the documentation page that we currently look at, we can also load the referenced account node and then do the same thing. So the indicator is not only shown on the account itself, but also on its documentation page. I'm going to skip that one. There's not really new stuff on it. This is a nice one too, because it introduces a concept of loops. So sometimes we have, for example, node reference fields, and we never know how many nodes are being referenced. So we load the list of referenced nodes as an example, loop through the list, verify certain things, like, for example, are there duplicates in there? If so, just invalidate the form and tell the user what to do about it, and things like that. And in this one, there is even a second loop that we go through. And only if any of the conditions apply, there is a prepare error action that collects all the variables that are required, and that calls the custom event that we saw at the beginning, and that handles the error message to the user. And last but not least for this one, 2 parts that I want to show. That one looks like a snake. The only reason for that is if you always have straight lines, it becomes boring. That's the only reason. Now what it does is, there are certain revisions of nodes that are only allowed to be viewed by certain roles. So we're going to go through the list of roles. That looks like a long list, but I tell you there are 35 or 40 roles on that Drupal installation. It's quite a lot. You don't ever want to go to that permission settings page because that loads for ages. And we're going to redirect the user to a different page if they have no permission to actually do that. Then there is one more thing, and it's called workflow transitions. And that one I think is a nice one too. The content editor, at some point when they are done, they are setting the status of the node to pending owner approval. Now, there are 17 different teams that could be the owner of that node. We don't want to bother the content editor with deciding who is the right one, right? So therefore, they just set it to pending owner approval. ECA finds out from certain values in the system who owns that node, and then forwards the workflow transition to the right team so that they get notified and know that they have to do something about it. So that's about this one. The next one is a private project at the beginning. It's about animal pension booking systems. So my cousin is running a hosting farm for animals if people go on holiday. And that's running on an old Windows 7 with an Access database, and it's slow as hell. And he said, look, couldn't you do something for me? And I said, well, I would love to. Let's give it a try. Oh, why is, I know, I was in Zoom mode, right? So I have to zoom out first. So it's a booking system, and I have a video, just because I didn't want to do a live demo, so I recorded it, and I'm going to talk you through. So whenever they log into that booking system, and it's not the customers, it's only the staff of that booking environment, they get to a dashboard, and we have lots of custom entities. That's a custom module. That's not done with ECA just because it's not appropriate for you. So we don't do everything with ECA, by the way, but a lot. Now let's see how you can create a new booking, because that's what's happening there all day. There is somebody on the phone saying, I would like to come. So there's a shortcut, opening a entity create form, and what they have to do is select the customer first or create a new one. We have John Doe in Barcelona. We add that to the booking, save the booking, and then we arrive on the canonical page of that booking itself. What's next is adding an animal, and in that form, that button is actually provided by ECA. I show you that later on, and I show you how we manage in ECA to click that button that opens another dialog, a modal dialog, containing a form that we can edit. There is, other than the custom entities, there is no code. The whole application is done in ECA. I fill in the time range for how long that animal stays with us, select a room where that one should go in. Oh, and as you can see, I struggled with the smart date widget a bit, so I have to learn how to use that properly. That's why that took a little longer. And now what we find is still the booking site with a view on the bottom that contains that allocation of that animal to that specific room. What we also add is some deliveries. They can add services that they provide, like heating system, medicine, food, or whatever. We select the heating for the dogs in their building for 4 days for the dog that was just allocated before. And now you can see we have a view with the allocations. There's only one, but it could be more, and a view with all the deliveries. The view attached to the booking is also done by ECA. We're going to look into that in a minute as well. Now, there is a contract involved with the booking. Now, with ECA, we provide a button, create a contract. That contract contains all the relevant data with tokens. They can write their own template. You can see that over there. We close the contract, and now we complete the contract. We now know that's all in there. They have an option to just change the contract for a specific customer if they wanted to. Now, once we have completed the contract, that sends the booking confirmation as an email to the client with that text in it. That's easy email, by the way. Great module, like that a lot. Integrates nicely with ECA. HTML with attachments. There is the PDF for the user. And yeah, that's about it. Going back to the booking system, finally, all of those bookings and allocations end up in a calendar so that they have an overview, which animal is in which room on what day. And that's the overview of what the application does. And I mentioned quite a few times that all that is done with ECA. Now let's dive into that step by step. First of all, we have a hierarchy. There is a booking, and a booking contains any number of allocations. Now, the allocation itself is a node with a canonical page as well, but there is no reason for a user ever to go to that canonical page. If they click on an allocation and want to see the detail behind it, what they very likely want to see is the booking that allocation belongs to. Because of that, what we are doing, the first step, pretty simple. If an allocation page is requested, and if the route is really going to the canonical page of that, we load the allocation, see if it's really the full view of that. We have another use case later on where the allocation is viewed in a modal. There we want to show the allocation. I tell you why in a minute. If it's a full view, we load the booking this allocation belongs to and do a redirect to that booking page. Pretty simple. No reason to show that one. But I want to show you the second one. Back to the calendar. We can click on any of those allocations as well. That opens by ECA, modal dialog again. And here we do see the allocation content as well. The allocation has an animal, a room, a reallocate button, and it comes with the booking. Now the question is, where do all those rendering contents pieces come from? Guess what? They come from ECA. Now let's have a look first into the manage display of an allocation. There we have all the fields that the allocation has like in regular Drupal, and we have two extra fields, action buttons and booking. You know extra fields in Drupal? That's a hook where you can define, and I found it difficult all the time. You have to do 3 or 4 different things to actually get to the goal. Here you just do one, which is defining the extra field as an event in ECA, and when that one is used, produce the reallocate button, which is a render element that you can see on the right. The other extra field is the booking. That creates some markup first, which is a horizontal rule, and then a heading with booking. And last but not least, we append the rendered entity of the booking that belongs to that allocation. That's it. And with that, you get that view that we saw in the modal dialog, that one. It's that simple. It's 4 minutes and you're done. Maybe not on day one. It takes a little longer to find out. There is a learning curve involved. I appreciate that. But you get used to it very, very quickly. And it's just fun doing that. The third one is, I go into that one too. I probably skip one or the other later on. We are back on the booking page, and you can see there is a date range on the top, date and time. But that one is never keyed in by the user because the booking period is derived from the periods of the allocations that we see at the bottom. So every time we change the time of those allocations, not all animals will stay for the same period in some cases. So every time an allocation is being saved, the booking recalculates the time period for the overall booking. And that's done over here. First of all, when you edit an allocation, we disable the animal field because we want to prevent from the animal being changed afterwards. If they made a mistake, they have to delete the first one and create a new one, which is just because of keeping references intact. And we delete the price as well for that one. I'll show you in a minute why, because we have automatic price calculation if not provided by the user. And now you can see we have changed the dates, and ECA automatically recalculated the date range up over there. Now, step number next is go into, well, the price is as well now different, 29 and 22. And now we dive into that ECA model and see how that recalculation of the price works. That starts with pre-saving the booking, set a max start date, so we start with 9 million. Then we set a minimum end date, that's 0. And then we loop through all the allocations, look into the start date. If that's larger than smaller than the current one, then we set it to the new one. And so we loop through them all, and so we find really the first start date and the last end date. And then we set if they differ from what we currently have, then we change the booking date, save it, and we are done. That's all. Completely automatic, pretty simple. The price, I don't have a video for that, but you can see that down here. And I think this is one of those where I strongly believe a customer understands how price calculation works by looking at that one. They wouldn't ever understand if it were in PHP code. Not to forget about such systems are changing all the time. Customers come back with new ideas and say, look, we have to change the price calculation. Doing that here is much more transparent and reliable. This is working like if we save an allocation, we check if the price field is empty. If not, then the user decided to have a specific price for that one. If it's empty, we load the booking. If that booking has a price, we take that one. If not, we're going to look into the animal. If that one has a price attached to it, then we use that. If not, customer. If the customer doesn't have a price, go to the breed. If the breed doesn't have a price, then use the global default that's been set in settings eventually. And then set the price for the calculation, and that's it. Going through that model is pretty straightforward and understandable by almost everybody. Going out of Zoom. Oh, went back too far. That's the booking one. You can imagine bookings are fairly complex. I'm going to skip that other than just showing you that we have, but we saw that before. We have the action buttons on top. We have those come from extra fields defined by ECA. We do have the contract thing. We have an embedded customer, and we have the lists down there. But I show you how that works later with the customer system, which is actually next. So this is all that happens with customers. First of all, we auto-generate customer labels. Like we have the address field, and if the address field, let's start the video. There we go. We edit the customer that currently has a label, John Doe, Main Street, Barcelona. We don't touch the label field. We just make changes in the address field. And what we ask ECA to do is to update the label up there from some components in the address field. And there we can check, is street provided, then use it. If not, skip it. Same with city, same with the first name and last name of the... No, they are required anyway, so that will be filled in any case. And then we look into the ECA model on how that calculation is being done. You see, it's updated straight away. What we also have is, now we look into the model first. If the address is provided, it could be empty, but if it's provided, we take the first and last name and put that on a list as taking the tokens. Then we check if the street is available, then we add the street. If so, we add the street to the list. If the city is available, we add the list to the city, the city to the list, and then we implode the value with a separator, and the result is being set as the label for that customer. That's something I would probably struggle with the auto label module. Here we just have all the building blocks available. But that's about that one. I probably skip video number 2 as well, but I would like to show you the third one, which is the canonical page of the customer. There you can see we have, I should start the video as well. Yeah. This is the embedded rendered customer in the booking form. That's something Core provides. But let's have a look what's within that rendered customer. There have been 2 buttons, edit and the drop down. In the pop-up, we have a third button, which is the view contact. We thought if you are in the booking form, there is no reason to actually look into the detail of the customer. But from here, it may make sense to get to this page, and that's why there is also a view button. So an extra field for buttons in the customer. there is at least the render a link component, which contains the instruction that it should be opened in a modal dialog box. If we are in a modal, we also show the button for the canonical page of that customer. And last but not least, the add booking for animals is a drop-down button, and you can define all the drop-down items and their URLs just in a YAML field. Now, if we go into that, we can see there are 4 options. And for example, if we want to have a quick step to add a booking for that customer, ECA opens that form. The customer is already pre-filled, and the field is read-only, so that it doesn't have to be changed at any time. So that's about that one. There is more, and I think that final one is blowing away myself, because it does a complete interaction with the end user. And let's have a look into that video. That's a bit longer, 2.5 minutes. We are on our booking form again. No, not booking form, booking canonical page details. We complete our contract, and as we know, that's sending an email to the client. And what we want them to do is to sign the contract, right? It's not a solid digital signature system, but that's not necessary either, because we talk about hundreds of euros of fees probably, so you don't need that legal certainty. It's enough that they get some kind of confirmation that the customer agrees to the contract. So what they get is a link, and we open that link in a separate tab just for demonstration purposes. And that page is generated by ECA. So we define a route, ECA responds to that route, and we have an ID, which is a random number that's sent in the email as well. Now we fill in the ID on purpose with the wrong value. Form validation says, nope, wrong, you are not the right person. Now we use the correct ID, and the customer gets the information that's in German. It says, thank you, you can close the window, all is done. At the same time, they receive another confirmation by email that says, yeah, we received your signatures, thank you very much. We are looking forward to see you in our properties. How do we do that? That's the response to the signed contract URL. We add an intro text, we add the contract, the rendered entity, and then we create a form. And that form has a build form event. And when that is being dispatched, we add an ID field, followed by the submit button. And we also add the booking ID as a hidden field, so that we later on know which booking that belongs to. Form validation checks if the ID is correct. If not, produces an error message. But if it's correct, then there is the submit form, which loads the booking, loads the contract from there, sets the contract to signed, forces a new revision and writes a revision log into that, saves the contract, prepares the email, and further to the right, create an email and sends that off. All that done with ECA, and I'm sure this is much faster than doing anything like that in code. Thank you. I need to close that one. Let's go to full screen again. And last but not least, I don't have a video for that one because this is about crons, and crons are running in the background, so there's not much you can record. This is all about, we're running crons to find out which customers are due for arrival. For example, let's say day after tomorrow. We call a view to find out which ones those are. Views is great. We didn't write our own query generator. We just said there is one. Let's utilize that. We receive a list of bookings. We go through the list, and each one we put on the queue so that another process later on is going through the queue and sending emails as reminders to the customer at the right time with the right content, reminding them about when they should arrive. And many, many more things. So, conclusion. There is one sentence I would like to say, which is ECA is for every Drupal site. And you probably got an idea why that might be true. There are simple tasks We have seen them. There are complex models. Customers love those. Why is that? Because they understand and they feel involved. And that makes most projects much more convenient in our experience. Developers, though, sometimes don't. Maybe for the same reason. Maybe because clients suddenly understand. I don't know, that might be, but not for all of them. In most cases, it's about custom code. They are telling us, I am faster writing custom code than building ECA models. And I do agree, that's certainly true on day one. But your project lasts many years. And that balance between custom code and a model like that turns around very quickly. And the return on investment is huge. Let alone look into the buy-in that you get from stakeholders at your customers, people who are not technical, but they understand processes. They know what's going on and they can tell, yeah, that's correct or it's wrong, you have to fix that. There is a reservation about we can't test those code, but we can test custom code. Well, you can test that one as well. We do that for all of them. For every ECA model, there's a Cypress test, and before we deploy updates, we always run them through, and we know all the ECA models are still valid. And last but not least, is that in any way performance relevant? No. I haven't managed to measure any slowdown, no matter how complex our ECA models have been, which is why ECA only listens to those events that are relevant for the models, and what happens afterwards is exactly what would happen if you wrote custom code instead. And ECA is really optimized. Your custom code maybe not. So therefore, performance should not be a concern at all. Now, an ECA model is nothing else than a config entity. And if you know config entities, you know how easy it is to deploy that to other sites, to other stages. Not to forget that what are recipes? A wrapper around config entities. So you can have all your ECA models as recipes, building libraries with functionality that you want to reuse in other projects or probably even share with other agencies in the Drupal community. There are quite a few links if you want to get started, but only remember the first one because that allows you to get to the slides. But the slides are linked in the app from Kuoni as well. And from there you get to all the other links and can click on them. And there is the ECA project page on Drupal.org as well, which provides those links too. And now it's time for Q&A. But before we're going to do that, please go to the feedback form and provide your impression about that session, because I want to learn from that and I want to do a better job next time according to what I learned from you guys. I thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And I'm looking forward to your questions.
Yeah, can you please go to the microphone? Yes, because we're recording.
So just a quick question. I don't know if you mentioned, or probably I missed it, but how much of those workflows you shown, how much is out of the box? And is all out of the box, or did you had to, provide some custom plugins there?
It's all out of the box.
Great.
There is nothing I had to configure, nothing I had to develop extra. All of that is part of ECA or one of the extra modules that are available on Drupal.org.
Great, thanks.
Thanks. And thanks for the module. It's very useful. We've only used it to a limited extent. And so the learning curve is a challenge. I've just realized that you now have the library of examples, and that I think will be extremely helpful. There's the usual just trying things out, trying to go through the documentation. The examples will be super helpful. But any other tips on the learning curve?
How to get started? Yeah. There is a TV channel as well that currently contains 35 or 40 videos demonstrating on how to achieve certain things. Some people like that and prefer that from reading. Then there is the Drupal Slack ECA channel, I strongly recommend joining that because there's a great team of people using it and there is fantastic feedback. If nobody else can answer, we jump in as well. And the issue queue on Drupal.org. So don't hesitate, ask for help. We are happy to do that. And the experience shows once you got moving, you accelerate very quickly. It happens just while you're doing it.
I had two questions, but I think I'll just leave it to one. When we were first talking a couple of years ago about this, there was a discussion about using ECA as a replacement to actions. Was that the module? Anyway.
So it actually utilizes actions.
Right.
So
right.
the A component in ECA is the
Of course.
action plugins that come with Drupal core.
Right.
So any other module that provides an action plugin appears in the ECA UI automatically. It can't prevent that from happening. So we just grab everything we can get.
The question was, is there, I guess my question is, we were discussing how problematic Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 and above upgrading of stuff for actions. And I wondered if you had any other experience or migration sorts of plugins to convert
I
these kinds of things.
guess
to
you are
ECA.
referring to the rules module.
That's the one, rules.
Yeah. Well, actually, we looked. I love rules. I used it a lot in Drupal 7, and it was great. We looked into rules in the modern Drupal world, not just once. We had many projects where we had similar requirements, and we always had internal discussions. Should we help rules to get across the finish line to become stable in Drupal 9 or 10? We talked to all the former rules maintainers why they are no longer maintaining it. And the conclusion was rules was great in Drupal 7 times, but it is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to migrate the code of rules. I'm not talking about all the sites that are using rules, just the module itself, over to the modern Drupal. It is a thankless job. And there is one guy left, TR. He hasn't given up yet. He's trying. He just published version 4.0 as a stable one. I'm not sure if that is something I would like to build my house on top of for the next 10 years. Not because he's doing a bad job, just because there's so much legacy code in rules that it is a hell of a maintenance job. With ECA, it's much easier. Now, that's why ECA came about and we didn't spend time on rules. Now, how do we get the rules across to ECA? I don't believe that we can automate that, but also for a good reason. Rules models that you have developed in Drupal 7, they come with legacy as well. It's probably time to review your processes that you had maybe 10 years ago, now rebuilding your site on Drupal 10 and looking into those rules and finding out, well, probably 80% of what's in there is redundant. You don't need that anymore. So you're doing yourself a favor in understanding what the old rules are doing and rebuild it new in ECA. It will be more performant, more reliable, and better maintainable.
Okay, thanks.
So great work. First, I have a question from developers' perspective. So the developers usually ask, how do I debug this? Because otherwise I use my debugger and go through.
Yeah.
And how do I debug it here?
There are several ways of doing that. The first step usually is add some message actions to your flow and output on screen the values of certain tokens, variables, and stuff like that. Then you can see how far is your model actually being executed and what is the context at the time where it seems to fail. Very often you find out already why it was going wrong. If that's not sufficient, we have a debug mode which writes a lot of log messages to Drupal log watchdog, and then you can scan through that and find even more details about it. If that is not sufficient, I recommend using Web Profiler because ECA integrates with that. So for every page request from Web Profiler, you get a report on what was going on. And it reports every single step ECA is performing, including the conditions validation and so on and so forth. And if that doesn't work, use Xdebug and debug as you would do with custom code, because ECA is nothing else than PHP code in the background. You have any access to any code and you can find out where it goes wrong. Those are the steps I would go through.
Great, perfect. And one more question. Is there a way now to use also the event architecture of JavaScript?
Yes and no kind of thing. You mean reacting to events in the browser?
Yes.
Not yet. What we have is quite extensive Ajax support. So all the Ajax functionality from Drupal core is accessible by ECA. But we are planning to provide a mechanism that we can also respond to JavaScript events in the browser. But that's the future.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Perfect.
Hello, thank you for this presentation. I'm Mathieu from ESAN, and I have two questions. The first one is, can be ECA workflows chained with another ECA workflow and chained with another, or maybe embedded?
The answer is yes. It's probably technically not exactly what you expect because ECA is always event-driven. So you can have hundreds of events in your ECA models, and you just have to make sure that those events are being dispatched.
Okay.
And if you want to chain different models in that language, then you can use a custom event, which is available from ECA, and then one of your other models can actually dispatch that custom event and make sure that it dispatches at that moment in time when you need it. And that's how you can chain things.
Okay. So it's possible. And
It is.
The second question, is there some kind of permissions that are available for a whole workflow or for just a part of a workflow? As an example, I would like to build some kind of big workflow that works well, and my client have the ability to adjust levels or some things like that in just a few nodes or few steps.
Yeah. We don't have that yet. There is an ongoing discussion with the Australian Drupal community because they consider putting that into the government distribution, and they have the same concern. They like the idea that their customers can define their own automation, but they don't like to give them the full power of ECA. We haven't come to a conclusion yet what's the best way of doing that, because I would like to have a nice out-of-the-box experience for everybody else, so I don't want to limit functionality by default. Now, what is the best way to limit functionality without asking somebody to check 650 boxes or maybe 640 because 10 are allowed and the other 640 are not? And also what we need to discuss is not only about what can the user use when they build models, but it's also about, do you want to limit the execution of certain features or certain actions? And if that's the case, then we are in much bigger trouble, because then we also have to think about what do we do with those if we distribute those models to other sites. So this is a topic that we are discussing extensively, and we will eventually come up with a solution, but I believe we just haven't found the right approach yet. But I see the need for it.
Very interesting. Thank you for your
You're welcome.
There's one question on the board as well. Andreas asked, is it possible to address external APIs, QS or legal document?
A clear yes. ECA itself doesn't provide action plugins like that, but there is a module which is called HTTP Manager. Client manager, yeah, thanks for that. And that one can define API endpoints that it wants to talk to. And each of those endpoints that are configured for that module are available as an action plugin for ECA. So you can talk to any external service. There is no limit whatsoever. This is really exciting. Thanks for that question. It just highlights how powerful that is.
Just very quick question. In one of your slides, I saw that 3 or 4 blocks were coming out to the same hour or like in parallel. I was wondering how you control the order of execution of those blocks and if it's easily swappable.
It is, you have an event and an action that you want to execute under certain conditions only. So usually there is one arrow that can contain a condition. If it doesn't contain a condition, it's executed anyways.
Okay.
If you have more than one arrow, this is like OR conditions.
Okay.
So if at least one of them is true, then it gets executed. That's also the order doesn't really matter for that case. However, the order does matter in other cases, and the order is currently not controllable. This is because we use a BPMN interface, and BPMN in the standard doesn't know the concept of weight or orders or anything. We are planning to add a weight field to each of those links, and then you can control the order. You can do it now by removing them all and add them in the right order that you want them to be executed.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Looks like that was it. Thank you.